Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Honestly speaking, I don't know what to say, but I'll say it all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your local time zone. This is Rakan Al-Shibal, the Technical Program Officer of NACE-Dhahran section. And today, on behalf of the entire team of NACE-Dhahran section, I would like to welcome all and each one of you from the entire globe joining our webinar, the first webinar in our technical webinars program. Before we go and proceed, I would like to express some appreciation to our sponsor, Cortec Middle East. So a huge appreciation goes to them. Before we go to the webinar, I would like to share some ground rules and some tips of the features of the platform that the first time you are using, and maybe you are the first time you are joining this platform. So for the mobile users, if you can see below the live screen, you will see the chat area. In that chat area, you have two buttons. The first button on the right, you can switch between two modes, the chat mode and the Q&A mode. On the left button, you can select whomever you want to send the message, either it is public or private. You can send it to everyone or to the admin. So if you have any technical questions during the presentation, please make sure you select the Q&A mode and post your question. We're going to facilitate all the questions at the end of the presentation in the Q&A session. If we fail to answer all the questions, please rest assured that we are going to accommodate answering all the questions by email, inshallah. I have a second announcement, and I can say it I can say it proudly. We are in NACE-Dhahran section. We are always actively involved with our community. So I would like to take this stage to invite all of you to join our community in the social media and in the WhatsApp group. Once the picture pops up in your screen, you can use either the link to join the WhatsApp group, or you can easily use your camera to scan the barcode and join our community in the WhatsApp group. We are sharing the latest announcement and the events we are hosting as a NACE-Dhahran section. Starting with the webinar agenda, our webinar today will start with opening remarks with the chairman of NACE-Dhahran section, Mr. Yusuf Al-Dosiri, followed by a 40-minute presentation by Cortec Middle East, then a Q&A session. And at the end, as you see here, I think we are gonna all be stay tuned for the last section of the webinar, the raffle drawing. So stay tuned until the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I'm gonna leave the mic to Mr. Yusuf Al-Dosiri to deliver his opening remarks. Go ahead, Mr. Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Rakan, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I hope all of you and your families are in good health during the situation the world is undergoing, which I hope it will be over soon. I would like to welcome you all to the first NACE-Dhahran section webinar. We always look to introduce new platforms to share knowledge between professionals. And this is also in line with the Industrial Revolution 4.0. This is considered the start of a series of webinars that the section is going to conduct in the coming months. I am proud to be part of the section team who always work hard to satisfy the members and try to create such a good environment. Without further ado, welcome again, and I hope you will enjoy today's presentation.
Thank you, Yusuf. We are moving to our webinar, but before we start the presentation, I would like to take this stage to introduce our presenters, Mr. Chris and Mr. Khalil Abid. Mr. Chris, he's going to be the facilitator of today's presentation. He has more than 40 years experience with major international oil companies such as BP, Amoco, and Phillips Petroleum in both upstream operations and engineering. He is a recognized industry expert in all aspects of asset integrity. Mr. Chris is active in NACE technical committees. He's also the vice chair of SDG8 corrosion management. Mr. Khalil Abid, he's the strategy and innovation director of Cortec Middle East. He has over 15 years experience in technical and managerial positions in both the construction and oil and gas sectors. He is also heavily involved in developing preservation standards and procedure for international companies and contractors. Mr. Khalil, he's an active member of NACE, and he's the vice chair of NACE Body of Knowledge Committee. So our attendees, please enjoy the presentation. Mr. Chris and Mr. Khalil, please turn on your mics and take the lead from here.
All right, can everybody hear me? Good morning, good afternoon, salam alaikum, and a very great welcome on behalf of myself, Chris Horton, and Khalil Abed of Cortec Middle East. As everyone is saying to each other, we hope everyone is healthy at home and seated comfortably now for the next hour. We'd particularly like to thank Yusuf and the NACE-Dhahran section team for inviting Cortec Middle East to give this presentation, their first webinar style meeting. It's new for us as well, and we're going to be focusing on the technology and challenges of asset and equipment preservation during construction, mostly, although we'll talk a little bit about operations, and primarily in the oil and gas sector. So here's our agenda. It's broken into 4 parts. It will take approximately 45 to 50 minutes. And we'll run it as a little dialogue between myself and Khalil, who will do most of the presenting. We'll use a few polling questions during the presentation. And at the end of the webinar, there will be a survey that will be emailed out to you. I would ask during the polling questions that we put up that you be fairly quick in your responses, just to help us with our time management. So we're going to talk about challenges and impacts related to equipment preservation, conventional and unconventional preservation methods, and best practice from major operating companies and as seen in mega projects. And we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So we encourage you to submit your questions online during the course of the presentation, and we'll do our best to get through as many of them as we can. Those we can't, we will answer and send out responses by email afterwards. So let's try the polling system, shall we? And just get an idea of the demographics of the audience. I think we have about 117 people online right now. So maybe you can just fill in this question and tell us what type of organization you are working for. right. Well, I'm not sure how well that worked or didn't work. I didn't see the results come up, which I expected to. So I don't know, Rakan, are you online there?
Yeah, Mr. Chris, we are online.
Do we want to try that question again?
Yeah, we can start the poll again, and once you end the poll, you will see the result on the site, or we can skip this one to the other poll, the next one.
All right.
Later on.
All right. Well, I've started it. Do I need to publish it?
Which one is it?
Question 1. What is the nature of your organization business?
So the poll is now published, and let's wait to the results. I can see people are putting and selecting one of the multiple choice options here.
All right.
And once we click, should we stop the poll?
Yeah, let's stop the poll.
Yeah, we have almost 24% upstream oil and gas production, almost 80% in both downstream refining chemicals and EPC, and the rest between option D and E.
Okay. Very good. All right. So many of you will be familiar with Cortec, but for those of you who aren't, Halil, give us a 30-second summary of Cortec Corporation, please.
Sure, Chris. Again, I hope I can compensate for the delay that we have, because I plan to cover a lot of material and a lot of ground to cover. But I will just go straight to the point. Cortec Middle East is the regional office of Cortec Corporation, which is a global leader in vapor phase corrosion inhibitor technology for the industrial sector and migratory corrosion inhibitor technology for reinforced concrete structures in the construction sector. We have 8 ISO certified manufacturing facilities, an R&D lab in North America and Europe. And since the establishment of Cortec Middle East, we have positioned ourselves to pioneer and lead preservation solutions, protecting life, assets, and the environment. We engineer and optimize solutions using VPCI and MCI technologies for chronic industrial challenges, such as preservation and mothballing, protection of storage tank bottoms and road crossings, and enhancing durability of reinforced concrete structures. Through a joint venture with the American University in Dubai, we have a state-of-the-art lab that is dedicated for testing and verifying products and optimizing our solutions for the Middle East harsh environment. As you can see here in the slide, Chris and the audience, Cortec has been supporting and providing major global, regional, and local operating companies, authorities, manufacturers, engineering firms, and contractors with solutions to their corrosion challenges for more than 42 years as Cortec Corporation and 13 years as Cortec Middle East. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Halil. Okay, so let's very quickly try and answer the question, why do we need equipment preservation? When do we need it? And what some of the benefits and challenges are. You know, the why ought to be very obvious to all of us on the webinar. We spend anywhere from 40 to 60% of our capital expenditure on buying equipment and materials when we build our new assets. And the moment they leave the OEM or the manufacturer's facilities and head to our construction sites for fabrication and ultimately into operation, they're potentially at risk from deterioration, primarily from corrosion, but not only. So the why is about protecting the value of our assets. And when it fails, of course, we can have HSE incidents and it can impact our asset, business and project performance. The when is when the equipment is being manufactured or packaged up at the OEM. That's frequently when the preservation life cycle starts, and it goes throughout the life cycle of the material or equipment. The benefits: reducing waste, managing corrosion, reducing downtime, ultimately underpinning our business performance. And when it goes wrong, as you'll see from some examples later, it can cost tens, even hundreds of millions of dollars, both in CapEx and OpEx performance. It can give rise to significant HSE incidents, can cause significant downtime or delays. This is a little extract I found from a mobile equipment preservation procedure. It sums it up quite simply, really. Rusting of equipment costs industry several billions of dollars every year and creates safety hazards for employees. That's why ExxonMobil recommends creating a rust prevention program, which can help minimize downtime, optimize production, control maintenance costs, and promote long equipment life. So, Halil, if I want to play devil's advocate here, I could say that, or conclude that preservation is really just about the corrosion protection of equipment and materials before they go into service. Would you agree with that?
Well, Chris, it is beyond corrosion management. And one definition that I always like to use for preservation is it's a set of strictly defined routines, schedules, procedures, and process actions that keep tagged pieces of equipment in working order. So it covers other equally important aspects, such as corrosion, but it's beyond that. It talks about, and it covers mechanical protection through material handling, inspection protocol of equipment and material during the different stages of the asset life cycle. It also includes a set of mechanical maintenance activities related to different components of the equipment. Another important aspect is the protection of equipment against microbial induced corrosion, scaling, molds, fungi, and even dust and sandstorms. Cleanliness, especially when it comes to the internals of pipelines or internals of equipment, is another major aspect of preservation, as it's considered a major delay factor in commissioning, especially in oil and gas projects. Again, it has to do with compliance with HSE requirements when it comes to disposal and discharge of preservation materials and fills. It also includes clear set of periodic monitoring and inspection activities documented through the use of a dedicated preservation program to ensure integrity and continuous effectiveness of the preservation itself.
All right. Well, I think you convinced me that there's a lot more to it than just thinking about it as corrosion protection of our equipment and materials. And we'll talk more about that later. Let's give us some of your perspective about the impact on projects, would you?
Sure, Chris. I mean, the industry performance data and our experience from the field suggests that lack of equipment preservation is one of the main contributing factors to schedule delays. Of course, it depends on the nature of the project, whether it's upstream, downstream, or midstream. A lack of preservation contributes to schedule delay between 10 to 20%. So, for example, in a 36-month project, lack of preservation can cause up to 6-month delay on a project, if not more in some cases. Why important now than ever? It's not only the question that we raised, Chris, in our presentation title. It's not only related to the pandemic crisis that we're passing through at the moment, but also to the new normal in industrial construction projects. The scale, complexity, the nature of projects which have recently or will have been executed is unprecedented. For example, in the chart that we see here on the slide, the World Energy Investment Outlook report in 2014, the International Energy Agency estimated a cumulative investment of $22.4 trillion in global oil and gas sector in terms of investment between 2014 and to 2035, which is equivalent to an annual spend of $1 trillion, which makes capital projects the new norm for the next 15 years, but also it brings a lot of its own challenges, which including challenges related to equipment preservation. Historically, the same report shows that we have failed to manage such large projects successfully, with more than 73% of the projects over schedule, and 64% of the project suffer from cost overruns. And in both cases, equipment preservation can be a contributing factor to the project cost overrun, and even becomes more pressing requirement when the project is facing a schedule delay due to other reasons. In fact, proper preservation in the area that it's an area that is notoriously overlooked, and projects on daily basis are paying dearly time and time again. The lack of integration of preservation routines at each stage of the project can have impact between 3 to 12 months, Chris, if not more. I've personally experienced delays that went beyond that, depending on the scale of the problem, which puts the hooked up equipment under higher risk of failure during commissioning and startup. Back to you.
Yes, I think many of us will have shared some similar experiences, but for the benefit of the audience, here are two examples. We've left the companies' names off for obvious reasons, but these are two very large international oil companies, projects in the last few years. One of them down in Australia, a carbon capture plant, part of a bigger mega project underway down there. They faced a 2-year delay after startup checks for the system found leaking valves, corroded valves, problems with water and corrosion in a pipeline. And in the Mediterranean Sea, another operator with a large gas field development, again, during commissioning, found corrosion problems of equipment that resulted in a 12-month delay to start up. And I think you're going to show us just an example of figures of what these delays cost in terms of money.
Definitely, Chris. Just to help us quantify the impact, the monetary value of the impact of the delay. For example, in a 9 million metric ton per annum refinery capacity, it costs about $1.5 million per each day of delay. So a delay on such a project scale can be between 3 to 12 months. This means an impact between $150 to $700 million as loss of investment. Not to mention the cost of rework and recommissioning associated with the delay for the contractor themselves.
Why don't you go ahead and share with us a few specific examples of equipment failures that you've seen and what the consequences have been?
Sure. I mean, the lack of preservation, Chris, and the audience affects all types of equipment: static, rotating, electrical, instrumentation, and even civil engineering items. Several types of damages occur at the site due to lack of proper preservation during storage in the laydown yard, after installation, and during pre-commissioning. The consequences usually are repair or purchasing of equipment that causes delays due to all the necessary rework and installation and commissioning. For example, in this site, we in one of the projects, total of 8 large air fin fan coolers bearings were badly mechanically damaged due to lack of preservation. Another example is for a multi-stage pump that showed corrosion in its internals, which had to be dismantled, reconditioned before actual commissioning. Another example is reciprocating compressor valve, which is basically supposed to be a 2-year operating spare stored inside the warehouse, but were found badly damaged within only 3 months of plant startup due to lack of preservation. There are many other examples, Chris, to lack of preservation, especially in the area in locations, for example, like the indoor or outdoor storage facility in a laydown yard in the project, where equipment is received with protective packaging from the OEM, which the industry standards refers to as initial preservation. And there is a huge confusion about preservation activities on site and the protective packaging or the initial preservations that comes from the OEM. Initial preservation in many cases gets compromised during inspection at customs and storage laydown yards, such as the pictures that we see on the slide on the left, where you have deteriorated tarpaulin material due to direct exposure to UV rays that has degraded over time. And also on the right, we can see that there is an opening where the protective packaging was compromised because of inspection during customs clearance. And it wasn't taken care of when it was received on site for several months. This is an example for stainless steel internal trays that got pitted because of sandstorms, where the sand particles carrying the chloride particles hit the stainless steel internals and caused pitting corrosion to the internals. That resulted in the project management team to reject the entire lot of the internal trays, and the contractor had to basically place a new order for stainless steel trays, and then waiting for all the produced new internal trays to be constructed and installed on site. Another example, final example, is the lack of preservation during construction activity here, which is the hydro testing of above ground storage tanks. We can see the level of pitting in the inside tank internals because the water that was used in the hydro testing procedure basically did not help to protect the tank during the hydro testing procedure. Back to you,
All
Chris.
right. Yeah. So I guess one of the conclusions from that is that the bigger the project, the bigger the challenge, given the size and the complexity. And even the largest companies and biggest projects can still get it wrong. So we'd like to ask another question in the poll. So I'm going to ask this question about whether you've experienced failures of different types due to preservation or lack of. So if you're able to see the poll and can respond, whether your company has ever experienced failures due to lack of equipment preservation during warehousing and storage, construction and commissioning, turnarounds or shutdowns, or all of the above.
Chris, I don't see.
Yeah.
I don't see any answers to the poll questions so far. Only one response. Okay. They started.
Yeah.
Seems that the answer is going to one direction, to letter D. This is interesting.
It is interesting, yes.
They're quite balanced.
Shall we end the poll?
Yeah, we'll end the poll now. All right. We want to go on now and talk a little bit about, briefly about industry standards, and also, more importantly, methods of preservation, both conventional and, as Halil likes to talk about them, unconventional. So tell us a little bit about this list on the page here, Halil.
Sure, Chris. Beside the clients and contractors and OEMs standards and specifications, there are industry standards that are available out there from associations like NACE, API, NORSOC, and even Cortec has made a preservation layup and mothballing handbook available for the industry. But I know that you personally have respect for mainly one of the standards, which is the, I think, NORSOC standard, Chris.
Yeah,
Can you explain to us why?
Yes, I will. But before I do that, I guess the observation I would make is, given the importance of the subject, there actually seems to be a dearth or an absence of really well-rounded guidance and standards. You know, when you look at this list, with the exception of the NORSOC standard that I'll talk about in just a second, they're all very specific and rather narrow in their field. So, you know, a big new project coming along saying, well, how do we approach putting in place a preservation standard or strategy for this project?
Mr. Chris, if I can interrupt here. We see a lot of comments that the sound is lost. So maybe we can turn the audio off then on, just to troubleshoot the error.
Okay.
Gentlemen and the attendees, can you write down if you hear our voice clear and sound?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we have one comment from Khalid Al-Aqil. He's proposing to refresh the browser for the attendees. So the attendees take this tip just to refresh your browser to get the voice back. Yeah, we're going to continue. Thank you, Mr. Chris.
Okay. So my conclusion on this subject is that there's actually very little published industry standards and guides, but one of the documents out there that represents, in my view, a good starting point is NORSOC. So NORSOC is the Norwegian Offshore Standards Organization. Well, it started off as offshore. It covers all technical and industry standards now in Norway. So they have a preservation standard that was originally issued or published in 1997. And there's a third revision of it now in 2015. And it's quite a high level document, about 20 odd pages. And it defines the principles and structure that ensure equipment and systems are kept preserved during all phases of the project before being taken into use. And it has sections on preservation principles, on preservation execution, and gives examples of what should be in preservation documentation dossiers. It goes to some lengths also, I think, to recommend that because of the vast amount of information and data that is generated over the life cycle of a project, that computerized systems are really the only way in which preservation requirements can be efficiently and effectively captured, and that the system should provide not only what the requirements are for all tagged equipment, but also the last and the next dates for preservation based on assigned intervals. So I recommend it as one of the few more complete documents out there in the industry, but I think we need more. So, Halil, let's talk about preservation methods.
Sure, Chris. Now, we talked about the industry standards, and according to my experience with the industry standards, which I reviewed most of them, they are mainly based on conventional preservation techniques, which have its own advantages and limitations. For example, as we can see on the slide, desiccants, general oils and rust preventives, dry air, which we might not have the time to cover their pros and cons now. But one very common example of conventional preservation methods is the use of nitrogen purging or blanketing. One of its main benefits is it's a commissioning friendly option. It doesn't impose any process contamination. However, it has associated limitations in terms of logistics, frequent inspection, and replenishment requirements. It also imposes health hazards that needs to be managed. So one of the unconventional techniques that is not very often covered in the standards is VPCI technology. So, and I will explain why I use the description or the term unconventional approach. So VPCI technology, as a technology, it has been out there in the industry for a few decades, but mainly used in packaging applications such as plastic wraps and papers and foam pads. Now, the picture on the right that you can see, which looks like table salt, is basically the raw form of Cortec vapor phase corrosion inhibitors, which are basically organic salts, which are mixtures of amines and carboxylic acids. They have partial vapor pressure that enables its protective molecules to evaporate, and that's why it's called vapor phase corrosion inhibitor. Evaporate, diffuse through the space, and form a monomolecular protective layer. Now, this ability to evaporate enables the VPCI molecules to provide protection in three phases: the continuous electrolyte, the vapor phase, and the interface between the vapor phase and the continuous electrolyte. Now, the vapor phase corrosion inhibitor technology itself is not unconventional, but introducing it to fills such as hydrotesting water, combining it with nitrogen and dry air is what is unconventional. The introduction of VPCI complements nitrogen and dry air performance and makes them more resilient to site conditions, which I will share some of the examples, successful implementation of such approach in some of the onshore and offshore projects that we had. Now, Cortec vapor phase corrosion inhibitors have several benefits. They provide three-phase protection, as I mentioned in the previous slide. They provide multi-metal protection, so not only ferrous, but they also provide protection to yellow metals and copper and brass, etc. They don't require replenishment if the preservation conditions were maintained as requested during the preservation duration. They can be inspected without imposing health hazards like nitrogen. Vapor phase corrosion inhibitors also have limitations. So it's like any other techniques, such as potential of contamination for the system if the wrong product was selected and compatibility was not verified during the product selection phase. It also requires to maintain an enclosure most of the time during preservation duration, but it doesn't require a hermetic seal. Internals protected with VPCI can be inspected periodically without the need to degas or replenish like nitrogen. And to demonstrate the effectiveness and the synergistic effect of combining VPCI with nitrogen, a professor in California State University conducted an experiment where he basically devised two sealed containers, half full with an NaCl solution, and to introduce a corrosive environment. He installed basically two LPR probes in the liquid phase and 2 ER probes suspended in the evapor phase to monitor the corrosion rate in both medium. He injected the first container that you can see on the right with VCI, and the container on the left with nitrogen. And he basically monitored the corrosion rate from the LPR probes and the ER probes over 4,000 hours. And the findings, as you can see from the slide, the LPR and ER probe in the nitrogen blanketed container was showing an average of 2 to 2.5 NPY for about 3,500 hours, where the LPR and the ER probes in the VCI protected container showed something less than 0.2 NPY. And what is interesting is the effect of injecting VCI towards the end of the experiment to the nitrogen blanketed container that ended up reducing the corrosion rate of the LPR and the ER in a matter of 20 hours down to the 0.2 NPY range. And this is a slide that shows the surface condition of the different probes that was used for the VPCI on the left compared to the probes surface condition for the nitrogen blanketed container on the right. Back to you, Chris, on the best practice.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about best practices. Perhaps we'll have a quick poll again, a very quick single question at this point. I want to ask about whether you have a designated responsible person in your organization for equipment and material preservation. All right, I think we're getting a pretty solid indication of the what the overall answer to that question is, which is encouraging, but could do better. So let's end the poll at this point. And Halil, best practice is a term that's often abused and misused. Tell us what you consider to be best practice.
Sure thing. Before we talk about best practice, I would like to share from my experience the 4 critical areas that prevent successful implementation of an effective preservation program, which are, as you can see on the slide, it's to do with budget, the preservation philosophy and plan itself, management and coordination of the different stakeholders, and finally, the trained and competent people that are related or work on the preservation program. One of the most critical areas is the absence of preservation budget. They say money is the source of all evil in this world, and for preservation, we say lack of budget is the source of all failure. So without budget, you are destined to failure. But I think the issue with the budget is it depends on when you inject the preservation requirement in the project life cycle. So if the FEED and the bidding documents fail to position the requirement of preservation loud and clear enough with guidance to the bidder on how to develop a separate comprehensive budget, they are destined to, the bidders are destined to failure. They will fail to estimate the preservation scope. They will not give enough thought behind the scope. they will not be able to dedicate the required resources or materials that is required to develop a project-specific preservation plan. So that's area number one, which is the lack of budget. The second area, which is lack of integrating the preservation philosophy very early on during the front-end loading and the front-end engineering design. So that's the budget and also the design and the engineering aspect of the project. Such lack of integration may lead to adopting less effective or even ill-suited procedures for the type of equipment and the system under consideration. In many cases, what is applicable for or on equipment level might not be applicable on a system level, Chris. Which in many cases can be ignored by equipment manufacturers as they only aim at protecting their equipment, but sometimes we miss on the fit of the preservation procedure on an equipment level with the system. So developing that philosophy and plan from early on helps avoid such challenges. On the other hand, introducing the preservation as a funded deliverable very early on in the project helps integrate preservation methodologies with construction activities, which have, from our experience, have always resulted in substantial savings and very reliable results during the construction of the project. The third area is the management and coordination between the different stakeholders. And when we say mega projects, Chris, we always talk about projects are beyond $1.5 billion in value projects. And usually they are complex in nature. They include multiple packages. They have tens of contractors and subcontractors working on the project site, hundreds of suppliers. This complexity, if not managed properly by responsible preservation team that is responsible for harmonizing and coordinating all the preservation procedures and routines among all the different parties, preservation unfortunately fails, and it fails sometimes miserably on projects. One say that I would like to use is that maybe can be used in this regard is the roles and responsibilities. As Edward Deming says, divide responsibility and nobody is responsible. And I would like here to make myself clear on that. There is a responsibility and a role for every stakeholder to take, but only one party should be accountable for the results of the preservation program, which is the preservation management team of the contractor. So the OEM can play a role, the client by providing standards and specifications and requirements, the engineering contractor or the design contractor. There is a role and responsibility for everyone, but the accountability should be on the preservation management team of the contractor. The fourth area that I believe needs to be tackled and managed properly in order to achieve successful preservation programs is to do with the people. Basically having trained and competent people with the right qualifications and the background and the experience needed to successful delivery of a preservation program. And as Peter Drucker, one of my favorite authors on modern management, says, plans are only good intentions unless they immediately generate into hard work. And I say specifications and standards and plans are only good intentions unless they are decoded by experienced people into effective project-specific procedures. So without having trained and competent people, Chris, we'll continue to have failures in the preservation programs on construction projects. Now, in the last 13 years working with contractors, with operating companies, we kind of developed a perspective on what would be a best practice and how we can inject certain aspects into the preservation management program to help achieve a successful preservation program. Usually, successful implementation of preservation programs are the ones that manage to link or to create a link between the different parties, the requirements and the objectives of the operating company, the design contractor, the construction contractor, and the OEM. And this is usually done through deploying a preservation specialist third party, that is a third party to all the stakeholders who have experience with challenges of equipment preservation and best practices from the field. And they become part of the management team to develop project-specific plans and preservation procedures, as we can see here on the second point. And they utilize industry-proven technology. So it doesn't have to do with VPCI in specific. They can utilize conventional and unconventional procedure that best suit the requirement of the project. So they will rely on industrial-proven technologies, and as I said, which includes the conventional and unconventional preservation methods. They conduct compatibility testing, they supervise and they train preservation technicians, and they monitor the inspection, and they monitor and inspect and document all these activities through a preservation maintenance software. So injecting a preservation specialist third party into the equation help create that links and results in better management of preservation programs in construction projects. An analogy that I can draw to the corrosion management strategy framework depicted in the picture that we can see in the slide, which is taken from the NACE impact study, which covers the different elements of a successful corrosion management strategy, which talks about elements like policy, objectives, organization, resources, communication, training, and competency, and documentation, which basically covers something similar to what we covered in the best practice slide. Another analogy between preservation and corrosion is the corrosion management system pyramid of the impact study, where we can see that plans and procedures and practices at the base of the pyramid, and the policy, which is a management system element, at the top of the pyramid. But most common gaps and weaknesses that we find is in the enablers section, where enablers, controls, and measures section, which includes similar elements to what we covered in the previous slide. Now, Cortec as a preservation specialist company.
So Halil, just before you
Sure.
move on to that, the final two poll questions, let's have a look at, does your company have a documented preservation strategy and procedures? And just a simple yes, no, don't know. I see the yeses were out there quickly. All right, I think that gives us a pretty good picture. And then one more question, one final question. How are your equipment preservation records and information recorded and maintained by your company? Do you use paper, Excel spreadsheets? You have a dedicated software system? All right. Well, the don't knows is quite enlightening. Let's end the poll at that point. So, Halil, what is the role of the preservation specialist companies such as Cortec? And can you give us some examples of some mega projects you've supported?
Sure. Now, Cortec as a preservation specialist company can offer different services and contribute to the preservation management strategy or pyramid that we saw in the previous slides through consultancy and advisory services and role in building plans, procedures, and policies, supervision of execution of the preservation works, training and upskilling preservation personnel from designers to technicians to even inspectors. And also we take turnkey jobs as well, Chris. And a couple of examples that I can share with you and the audience on that is we start with the Gorgon project, which is a $45 billion downstream project in Australia, where Cortec was part of the preservation management team that I talked about. And the preservation team successfully, I mean, there's something wrong with the slide here where the location of the different fabrication yards are not clearly shown here, but the preservation team successfully developed and coordinated, supervised, and documented all preservation activities among 6 different fabrication yards around the globe. The overall scope of the preservation team was a successful delivery for preserving more than 400,000 tagged equipment from pumps, valves, turbines, compressors, and successfully coordinated and harmonized the preservation requirements among more than 700 suppliers and vendors. And I think from the poll answer to the what kind of system do our customers use in managing asset preservation activities, I think we both saw that it's a great extent of it, either paper filing or Excel sheets. And as you rightly said, Chris, from the beginning, is the only way to manage and document preservation activities is through a computerized approach and dedicated software for that. Another example is taken from offshore field development project in the Arabian Gulf, which is a $4 billion offshore field development. It was modular construction project where VPCI was successfully used in preserving all the pre-assembled modules and racks in state of nitrogen, which resulted in tremendous savings for the contractor in terms of rework of welding flanges to the beveled ends of the piping, and made the site inspection and extension of preservation duration much easier. Another example is for another offshore field development project, $3.5 billion project. The scope included preservation of all equipment on 7 wellhead towers and subsea pipelines. In this project, VPCI product was successfully introduced into the construction and the commissioning activity, which is the hydro testing, and eliminated the need for drying and purging with nitrogen. So VPCI 649BD, which is a hydro testing additive, provided protection for 3 years and kept the corrosion rate below 1 MPY in an offshore environment. The project has been recently commissioned smoothly with fantastic results. Some of the systems are the piping systems on the platform, HVAC systems. I'm going to skim through them very quickly. Crane and hoists, downhole corrosion inhibitor skids, platform security and communications, switchgear and battery rooms. And these also, Cortec has been globally active in other marine and offshore projects around the globe, helping clients and contractors to preserve FSPOs, FLNGs, FPUs, jackups and semi-submersibles, tender assets, drilling units, and drill ships. The final project is a downstream, Chris, which is a refinery and terminal project in the Arabian Peninsula, $7 billion project, 13 packages. Cortec, wherever possible, we preserved a good number of static and rotating equipment on that project, and also, most importantly, preservation of more than 100 above-ground storage tanks, basically using VPCI technology, where the vapor phase corrosion inhibitors were designed and the dosage was optimized to provide protection up to 2 years inside above-ground storage tanks. These are some of the examples from our side, Chris, on successful implementation of preservation programs.
Thank you, Halil. And I hope we've conveyed to everyone that there's a lot more complexity to delivering an effective preservation program. And it's not just about managing corrosion of equipment coming from suppliers. There's a whole management system concept behind it. It requires resources, and it has to be thought of right from the very beginning of the projects. So let's go into our Q&A. I'm going to be guided by the organizers as to how long we have now.
I think we have a good few minutes. I'll try to pick some of the good questions we have here. So let's see. Okay, we have one question. I'll podcast it now. Can you see it now, Mr. Chris?
I can, yes.
The question is, could your VPCI used as a gas phase corrosion inhibitor in the gas lines, for example? And does your VPCI have biocide effects?
Shall I go ahead, Chris?
Go ahead, Halil.
Sure. I mean, thanks, Yahya, for the question. Yes, VPCI, that we have VPCI products that can be used and already have been used in preventing corrosion in gas pipelines. And also, VPCI products can be, or the biodispersants can be formulated as part of the VPCI products to provide protection against biological or microbial effects. So the answer to your question for both questions is yes.
Okay, we have another question. Is there adequate guidance and best practice documenting current industry standards?
In general, or on the use of vapor phase corrosion inhibitors?
I think that in case of VPCI.
There are some, I would say, good starting base for the use of VPCI. For example, NACE has the recommended practice on the selection of rust preventives for interim protection of equipment. There is another test method published by NACE on qualifying vapor phase corrosion inhibitors and if they have the required vapor inhibiting abilities. But I don't think there is a comprehensive document currently out there in the industry for the use of vapor phase corrosion inhibitors.
Good.
But as Cortec, as I mentioned during the presentation, has developed a preservation mothballing and a preservation and layup handbook that made it available for the industry.
We have one untechnical question. Someone asking, do you have a representative or agent in Qatar?
Yes, we do. Basically, Cortec Middle East is the regional office in Dubai, and we basically look after the Cortec business in 21 countries, and including GCC and MENA region. And yes, we have an authorized distributor for us in Qatar. And we're happy to put whoever asked this question in direct contact with them.
Okay, perfect.
So Halil, here's one about if a tank internal is subject to cathodic protection, do you still need preservation?
I assume the question, Chris, this question is more applicable to operating conditions, because the cathodic protection system for tank internals gets active only when the tank is basically filled with the service or the fluid, and Cortec mainly provides protection during idle time when the tank is empty. So I'm not sure how relevant this question is to the application of vapor phase corrosion inhibitors with cathodic protection for the tank internals. But if he meant preserving the tank external against soil site corrosion, then yes, we have successfully implemented our vapor phase corrosion inhibitor technology in preserving tank bottoms against soil site corrosion in the presence of a cathodic protection system. And actually, we published several papers on that show there is a synergistic effect between VPCI and cathodic protection system.
Okay, we have another question. If you can see it podcasted here, Mr. Chris, could there be an open source software tool for implementing preservation strategies and procedures?
Okay. Chris, would you like to give your perspective on this, or you would like me to comment on it?
Well, let me start off, I think, because I think that's a question that we proposed ourselves for possible discussion. Yeah. Yeah, so what's an open source software tool? Something that's freely available. That there are several products, commercial products in the marketplace, software tools aimed at implementation of preservation strategies. Many of them are associated with general commissioning packages. So at this point, there is nothing available in the marketplace that is open. I think one of the challenges is that clearly, if you're going to move, as one should, to using software systems for managing the huge amounts of data that will be generated in a preservation strategy, you will want to interface that with other software systems in use, such as SAP or your maintenance management system, for example, maybe your procurement system. So I think a considerable challenge in that area, but not impossible.
Yeah. If you allow me here, Chris, to weigh in as well. I mean, as far as I know, there is no freemium or an open source or freely available software tool for preservation, but I'm aware of several options out there in the market, and we also, as Cortec, can provide input on that and suggestion for preservation software that we can implement with our clients. We have successfully used Cortec preservation software on multiple projects around the globe as well, Cortec. Chris. Any other questions, Rakan?
I have a question from, let me see, from Farahat. I think this is more related to Saudi Aramco. I'll let you, just a minute. Does Aramco has any active preservation guidelines or standard? If not, is there any work going on developing the guidelines? There is a Saudi Aramco engineering procedure 043, and this is the one just developed maybe a few months ago. Mr. Farhat, you can access it, and whomever from Saudi Aramco, they can refer to Saudi Aramco engineering procedure 043.
May I comment,
yeah, go ahead,
Rakan, on this? I think working with Aramco for almost 8 years, I honestly believe that Aramco is one of the few companies that has a great ability and flexibility to deal with challenges and react to it in a very constructive way. They have developed many standards and specifications, and they were able to respond to project-specific issues and make all the necessary changes in their standards and specifications quite swiftly. So I think working with Aramco is, and knowing how Aramco operates is actually, it's a testament for their quick reaction and actions they take in basically developing the preservation management program they have and reflect it in the different standards and the specifications.
Well said, Khalil. I think with that, do you have anything, Chris, to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to finish with this one question that I think...
That'll be the final question to us.
Yeah. So, Halil, what would you say when someone asks, how do you measure the efficiency and efficacy of VPCI after it's been applied, you know, to assure that it's still working as intended?
Yeah, there are multiple measures or techniques that we use. Some of them are quantitative, some of them are qualitative. In the qualitative, Cortec patented a detection kit that can basically react to the presence of the protective vapor phase corrosion inhibitors and change color, basically. So you get a qualitative indication whether vapor phase inhibitors exist in this void space or not. So we use that to monitor the presence of vapor phase during the preservation duration. We also use other conventional techniques, such as simple as corrosion coupons. We use electrical resistance probes. We use, if it's in a continuous medium, we use LPRs. So mainly these are the techniques that we use for measuring and monitoring the efficacy and the efficiency of VPCI during the preservation duration.
And of course, a degree of just straightforward visual inspection, yes?
Definitely. Beside the visual inspection, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Khalil, for the informative and fruitful presentation. And by the end of this presentation, I want to take this stage on behalf of NACE-Dhahran section to express our appreciation to our sponsor, Cortec, and Khalil and Chris for the informative presentation. So thank you so much, Khalil and Chris.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Raka, and thank you, NACE-Dhahran section team.
Please,
thank you.
Just be in the call, so you might win the raffle at the end.
I don't think so, but yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to just bring to your attention that we are going to have a joint survey between Cortec and NACE-Dhahran section. You will receive the survey by your emails later on. Your feedback is valuable to us, and it is highly appreciated to enhance our webinars quality in the future. We have one. Hello. We have one comer. He's a well-recognized comer. We are hoping that he's joining us. We are trying now. Just stay tuned for a minute.
Can I just add that?
Go ahead.
Sorry, Halil. I just wanted to add again to the participants that we will take a look at all of the questions that we weren't able to respond to during the webinar and do our best to provide a written response that will be shared with everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we're going to proceed. I think we are facing some difficulties in letting the other guy, the well-recognized person, to come in. Once he come in, then we are going to announce his name. Okay. As I said previously, please join our community in WhatsApp and LinkedIn. You can scan the barcode directly, or you can follow the link. We are going to pause for 30 seconds just to utilize this period to scan the barcode. Then we'll come back to do the raffle drawing, inshallah. Mr. And Dr. Terry Greenfield, the president of NACE, he joined us on the webinar, and we tried to let him in to give us valuable remarks on the presentation and on the webinar. I don't know if Dr. Terry, can you hear us or not? If yes, please, you can turn on your audio and your camera from the buttons in the top. Yeah. Mr. Terry? Hello?
I think, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Can you press the other button, the camera,
Hello?
to show your face, if you are willing to?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Do you hear us? Hello, Dr. Terry. This is a grateful day to have you in our webinar, and we want to take this opportunity to deliver some of your valuable remarks to the community here. We can't hear you.
Maybe he should refresh. Can we advise him to refresh?
Please turn on the audio. Your audio is off. If you can press, we can't hear you. Unfortunately, we can't see your picture. The other button, Mr. Terry. Yeah, here we go. No, try to press it again. Okay. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Yes.
It seems to drop in and out. I can try it.
Oh.
I think it is worth waiting for seconds. Let's give it a shot. We apologize for our attendees for the miscommunication here. Okay, I think we are going to go to the raffle drawings. Just wait. Press it 1, Mr. Terry. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop pressing buttons. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Just keep your phone away now. I want to see you and hear you. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Terry.
Okay. There's an interesting delay in feedback. Okay. Well, it's great. It's great to see what everyone's doing in these kind of trying and difficult times.
We hear you. We hear you, Mr. Terry. Go ahead. Go on. Do you hear us, Mr. Terry?
I think
that there is a delay between the voice and sound, since I think we are facing not a very high speed connection.
there seems to be about a 30-second.
Then we are gonna pause for 30 seconds and carry on in your speech.
There seems to be about a 30-second delay from when I talk to when I hear it. So I'm just going to talk, and hopefully you hear this. again, these are interesting times for us to get together and share information and do things. And it was great to see what you're doing and enjoyed the presentation very much. I know Halil and Chris both, and I didn't want to miss it. So I got up early and tried to drink enough coffee to get going. And as I know you're going to hear this in about 30 seconds from now, I'm just going to go ahead and again say thanks for doing great things. And we look forward to all being able to get together again in a conference soon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Terry, for your valuable remarks.
So everyone have a great time, and
I know our message will get to you after 30 seconds. So our appreciation goes to you. Thank you so much for. I know you are in your time zone around 5 a.m. Although you were committed to join us and give us your inspiration and inspiring talk to every one of the attendees and every one of us as NACE-Dhahran section. Thank you so much, Mr. Terry. Okay, gentlemen, we are going to proceed, and we are very sorry for the delay. I'm going to share my screen going to the raffle drawings directly. We want just to keep you further. Okay. Do you see the wheel going and moving? Please comment.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I want to see that in this side.
Rakan, why don't you zoom out to show the entire flywheel?
Yeah, will do. Will do. How is it now?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay. So we have all the names of the attendees here on the right, and we are going to shuffle the names just for okay, today we are going to have 3 winners with three prizes, $150 each. Your prizes will you're going to receive it by email. It is Amazon e-gift card. So we're going to take the first winner without further ado. Okay. First winner is Tariq.
You need to
Wait.
zoom in, Rakan. It's a bit small to see. Yes, that's much better size. Keep it at this size, please.
I think he's Tariq Hindaway. Congratulations, Tariq. We are going to reach you on your email, inshallah. The second winner is Muhammad Yunus. Muhammad Yunus, he's the second winner. Congratulations, Muhammad. And the last winner, the last one is Mauta Hulali, if I'm not mistaken. Congratulations, all of our 3 winners. You are going to receive $150 Amazon e-gift card by email soon, inshallah. By this, we want to conclude our webinar. We want to express our appreciation, first of all, to the attendees, and secondly, to our valuable presenters, Mr. Chris and Mr. Khalil, for the informative presentation. The number of attendees shows how the webinars was very interesting and very attractive. I'll leave it to you with the final remarks or speech, Mr. Chris and Khalid, if you have any.
No, we'd just like to thank you again. I'd like to thank you again for the opportunity. I think it's a great initiative. It's unfortunate the circumstances that brought it about, but I think we'll use this technology more and more. And I think we need to compliment Dr. Terry on his fine beard.
Also, from my side, again, I would like to thank everyone. I saw that we had more than 120 attendees this time. I think that's a great success for NACE-Dhahran section. I want to thank Rakan, Yusuf, and the entire NACE-Dhahran section team for all the efforts, the preparation that we have gone through over the last 2 days. And we look forward to having more webinars because we are launching a series of webinars over the next 1 month or two.
Yeah, we're going to
on multiple topics.
Yeah, we're going to consider this, and hopefully you're going to sponsor our webinars later on.
Sure.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Khalil. Thank you, everyone in the attendees. I hope you and your family are safe. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.